Hi, welcome to SBR Forum Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. We are previewing the 2013 Preakness Stakes, and right now we are talking with Lucas Marquardt. He is a horse racing handicapper and a horse racing writer for the Thoroughbred Daily News. We just got finished discussing Orb and the favorites. Now we're going to take a look at some of the long shots. Lucas, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, long shots in the Preakness Stakes. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself quickly and about Thoroughbred Daily News.
Thoroughbred Daily News is a daily publication that gets sent out via email and fax every night. We kind of lean towards the breeding side of the industry, cover a lot of sales and things like that, but we also cover the big races and do a lot of international coverage as well.
Let's see what you have to say about some of these long shots. It sounded like you didn't give a great, you gave kind of a lukewarm endorsement to Orb as a favorite this year. Let's start with Governor Charlie. There's a lot of people talking about him. Lightly raced horse, didn't race in the Derby, trained by Bob Baffert, of course, who's won five Preaknesses, and I'm seeing 20-to-1 odds right now at Bodog for futures odds on Governor Charlie. What's your take on that horse?
You know, he's actually one of the race that is a complete toss for me. I think that, you know, Baffert's always dangerous, but the fact that he is a Baffert horse is going to, you know, probably reduce his odds by 10 points from what they should be. You know, at the beginning of this year, this horse is probably 6th or 7th on Baffert's depth list because of injuries and a few horses that just didn't train on. You know, he's moved to the top here, and after not having a starter in the Derby, he'll have one here in the Preakness. I think he's a lightly raced horse. I can't overstate enough how speed favoring that track was in the Sunland Park Derby. Mm-hmm. His last race, which he won, he set a track record that day, but I think 2 other horses also did. And it was if you weren't on the lead or right on the right near the pace that day, it was tough to win. And so I think that on paper that race maybe looks a little bit more impressive than it was. Mm-hmm. He hasn't raced since March 24th, and he's one that I'd expect to be on or near the lead early. I think he's probably going to be very eager off that long break. And after 6 furlongs, I would expect to see him, you know, putting on the brakes maybe a little bit.
All right, great. Toss out Governor Charlie. Just tossed it out on my notes here. He is one that people have been discussing. All right, what long shot that we haven't discussed has caught your eye?
Yeah, the horse that I think is a play in the race is It's My Lucky Day. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to go off 3rd or 4th choice, but will maybe be 7 or 8 to 1. But I think he's a horse that early this year in Gulfstream, down at Gulfstream, had ran some very impressive numbers. He ran a 104 Beyer, which is the same Beyer that Orb got in the Derby. He had a big break between the Holy Bull and the Florida Derby and was soundly beaten that day by Orb. But up until the 8th pole, you really thought it was going to be a good horse race. And I think maybe he needed that race. You go on to the Kentucky Derby, and it's easy to excuse any bad effort over that track. And you know, maybe it's a little too easy to excuse some of those efforts, but he's a horse that I think, you know, at that price, I think figures to, you know, or could improve and really, you know, if he gets back to that earlier form that he showed earlier this year, I think he could really, you know, give Orb a run for his money, particularly the way the pace sets up as well. I expect you to see maybe not a super fast pace like you did in the Derby, but maybe 46 and change. And I think that could really set it up for a mid-pack horse, and that's where I'd expect It's My Lucky Day to be. Okay.
What's your take on the D. Wayne Lucas horses, Oxbow and Will Take Charge? Oxbow kind of had a really good trip in the Derby and you know, finished 6th, so that kind of makes me not that enthusiastic about him. But I'm thinking maybe Will Take Charge will kind of surprise you. What's your take on either of those horses?
Yeah, it was kind of the tale of 2 trips. I thought Oxbow actually ran a pretty good race, considering he was still pretty close to that pace. I mean, he wasn't. He was probably 4 or 5 lengths off of Palace Malice, who was going very fast up front early. But he was still pretty close to that pace. I think he probably went about 46 flat for the half, which going 1.25 miles is fast enough. And of those horses that were near the pace, he was one of the few that kind of stuck around. Palace Malice, Verrazano, Vijak, all those horses kind of faded to the back of the pack. And, you know, he was well beaten. I don't want to sell it for more than it was, but I thought that he ran an okay race. And I was a fan of his earlier in the year. I thought that he'd ran a couple of nice races, both in the Rebel and down at Fairgrounds. He'd run in a nice graded stakes down there. And he'd drawn wide both times, made premature moves, I thought, in both races. And after getting the lead, had tired late and just failed to hang on. So I don't love him. I don't think he necessarily has that killer instinct, but I think at the odds he's going to be, I think he's an interesting play. Of the other Lucas horse, he's actually got two more in the race. He's got, excuse me, Will Take Charge and Tuttletown 5.
Right.
The latter of those, Tuttletown 5, I'm not a big fan of. Will Take Charge is interesting. He's going to take some money. If you watch the Derby replay, he was making a wide move pretty much in tandem with Orb. And at the top of the stretch, or maybe a little bit before that, he got caught behind Verrazano as Verrazano was fading. And it really stopped his momentum. And after that, he didn't run on at all. So it was tough to say whether he was going to sustain that move or not. But it definitely impeded his progress, and maybe he was just frustrated after getting stopped and didn't go on. But, he's a horse that should be running at the end of the race. Again, I don't necessarily love him to win, but if you're looking to spice up spice up your trifectas or super, I think he's definitely a usable horse.
So out of all the non-favorites in this race, give us two that you think might have the best value out of all the non-favorites.
I think it's My Lucky Day. He's the horse that I'll be using on top along. It'd be silly not to use Orb on top in your deeper exotic wagers or in your multi-race wagers as well. He really does look like the best horse in the race. But for me personally, I'll be doing a lot of trifectas and superfectas, and I'll be using It's My Lucky Day and Orb on top. And then Oxbow, I'll use cautiously. I'll do a few saver bets with him as well. I'd be surprised if he won it, wouldn't be shocked, but I think he's going to be good value at 10-1 or 12-1.
All right, thanks. Now let's move on to matchup props, my favorite way to bet these races.